Hi, I'm Jack, and you're watching Hit the Snake. This is my top 6 countdown of the best games I played this year.
Hit the snake. Videos for no one watches now.
2017 for me was a year of weird. Everything from Twin Peaks returning to television, Resident Evil doing a soft reboot, to The Last Jedi subverting our expectations at every turn. It has been a great year for entertainment media. But you're here for the games, and boy have the games been eclectic as well. It is worth noting that I haven't played every game that released this year, so many of your favourites may not be included on this list. This is, after all, my top 6. But please do let me know down in the comments below what your top 6 games of 2017 are. Without further ado, let's get gaming, baby.
Number 6.
Friday the 13th, the game, is a game no one was asking for, but we got this year anyway. It is a stealth, action, horror multiplayer game, and probably the best online experience I've had this year. You can play as either a camp counselor whose only goal is to evade death via a mixture of stealth and puzzle solving, or you can play as the series villain that everyone loves, Jason Voorhees, who gleefully stalks around the map hunting down the counselors as a payback for the death of his mother. Whilst the matchmaking is slow, has poor connectivity, and it definitely needs to sort out its match hosting issues, the game at its core is loads of fun, even when it's glitching out in increasingly bizarre ways. It's a great development of ideas I first saw in games like Metal Gear Online with sneaking mission mode, and the more recent online tailing mode in Watch Dogs. It is also worth mentioning it's clear this game was made with a huge passion and interest in the Friday the 13th franchise, and its long expansive history. Gun Media draws on many facets of the series, and includes them in games in increasingly interesting ways. Original voice samples of the late Betsy Palmer, who played Pamela, are included as motivational speech to Jason. Also, series veteran Kane Hodder returned to do motion capture for the developer to make Jason's movements as close to the film as they could. You can play as many of the different Jason Voorhees from the films, as well as a few extra Easter eggs, such as the 1989 NES coloured Jason. One of the best inclusions in the game, in my opinion, is Jason's special abilities. These mirror his seemingly supernatural hunting abilities in the movies, such as being able to flash across the map in near an instant and to get the drop on an unexpecting counselor, as well as Rage Mode, which allows you to walk through walls much in the way he does in the films. It is constantly being updated with new content, and well worth the price of entry. It's a triumph for something so random that no one was asking for.
Number 5.
The controversial Nazi hunting series returned this year with Wolfenstein 2 The New Colossus. Even though I have not finished the game yet, I know that this is one of my top games of 2017. It's quite simple really. It's an FPS, single-player, story-driven video game. Yes, that's right, you heard correctly, no multiplayer, and better for it. It has incredibly well-written and voice-acted characters, wrapped up in an over-the-top alternative history storyline, with plenty of high-octane Nazi butt-kicking action. They have somehow taken a fairly bland but lovable muscle man action hero, whom seems invincible and impervious to pain, and somehow made him human. This is largely down to Brian Bloom's performance as B.J. Blazkowicz, coupled with the fabulous dialogue. The story itself takes some very unexpected twists and turns, which go against the usual affair of an over-the-top action video game. I was particularly bowled over by a scene which involves B.J. Blazkowicz and a sword. Safe to say, it's highly worth checking out for that scene alone. And boy god is it a hard game. That's a good thing in my opinion. Not enough games take the chance to be hard these days, and this is certainly welcome. The gameplay is tight, fast and exhilarating as you dual-wield machine guns and mow down corridors full of Nazis as you power slide towards them. It's brilliant. Machine games have outdone themselves yet again.
Number 4.
Bioshock in space, you say? Isn't there already a game like that called System Shock? Yes, but this is a spiritual successor to that game. Prey excited me from its trailer reveal back in E3 2016. And while I may receive backlash for this, I never really cared for the original, nor had interest in its cancelled sequel. Arcane Studios, one of my favourite developers from the last few years, took the helm to create a pseudo-sequel to Prey, but more so an homage to System Shock. The easiest way to describe it is, Prey is to System Shock what Dishonored is to Thief. The opening section is one of the coolest I have come across in video games, probably ever. It's worth playing for that alone. It has style, substance, and an interesting sci-fi alternative history, providing theories to questions like, what if JFK was never assassinated? And what if the USA put all their money into space travel instead of their armies? Prey has wonderful action, a free-roaming space station, zero-gravity environments, emergent gameplay, and surprisingly deep RPG elements, amongst much else. It also takes cues from survival games of today with really simple and interesting crafting mechanic. It robbed the plasmids out of Bioshock and renames them neuromods, and introduces you to one of the simplest and jump scariest enemies I have come across in a long time. The Mimic. Imagine head crabs from Half-Life, except they can shapeshift into any inanimate object and get the drop on you when you least expect it. It also gets extra points for having two playable characters, either male or female. I also must say I very much enjoyed the story, for as sparse as the narrative felt at times. It flips mainstay sci-fi narrative on its head, and depending on your choices throughout the game, it has a strangely uplifting idea at its core. It is highly worth playing if you're a fan of System Shock, Thief, Deus Ex, Bioshock, or Dishonored, and it scratches an itch that far too infrequently gets scratched these days for me in the gaming stratosphere.
Number 3.
Earlier this year, I spotted a tweet from the illustrious John Romero on how he was looking forward to playing Dusk. Safe to say, I pre-ordered it immediately when I heard the premise. Imagine it's not 2017, it's actually still 1997. Quake has just been released, and Dusk is being released the week after. That is the mindset developer New Blood has taken with this game. It's a development of the formula laid down by Quake and its alumni, and it applies to absolutely everything. We got low poly graphics, chunky pixelated textures, loads of gore, coloured keys, secrets to find, fast action, jibs, double barrel shotguns, and a whole lot of industrial metal. There is a simple narrative interwoven into the gameplay and the game world, which has been executed far better than an FPS of the early 90s. Whilst not fully released as of yet, the episode 1 chapter is more than enough to have me sold on one of my top games of 2017. What more do you need? John Romero said it was cool. It's definitely cool.
Number 2.
With Resident Evil 7, the series returned in flying form after the painfully boring Resident Evil 6. Taking major cues from recent developments in the genre from the likes of Amnesia to PT and every other Outlast in between, Capcom decided to shed the old gameplay of third-person action horror and opted to make the jump to first person. This slowed down the pace dramatically, but allowed the scares to get right up in your face and under your skin. It was all told a massive breath of fresh air to the waning series. It introduced new plot and characters while providing small slices of homage to stay true to the old series' roots. It is funny that by going in a completely new direction with Resident Evil's gameplay, it has actually come full circle in my opinion, and come closer to capturing the atmosphere and intent of the original game more than any other game in the series so far. It is definitely the scariest Resident Evil since playing Resident Evil 2 as a child, with some seriously bone-chilling enemies and sequences throughout. The first hour demo provided a great feel of how the game would play, while also providing simple backstory and an introduction to the house the game mostly takes place in. I was invested in the regular updates to the demo as well before the release, which at 100% completion would grant you access to an item you could take across to the full game. Also, an indicator to its quality was when I had my girlfriend, whom is no way a gamer, sit down with me and have her play through the demo herself. She was absolutely scared out of her mind. It was a brilliantly fun experience. A major mechanic that blew me away, and which is present in a few parts of the game, was the use of old VHS players and tapes, in which you would end up playing the camera person in each recording. Not only would this unearth new information regarding an area, you could also gain access to items previously unreachable by soft changing the past events on the VHS tapes. Also, a standout moment worth mentioning is when you are dragged to a funhouse style party where you have to solve puzzles in order to escape a room with your life. Solving them beforehand via the aforementioned VHS tape gives you the upper hand going in for real. Resident Evil 7 has satisfying weapons, puzzles, engaging gameplay, and a refreshing storyline, which has a slight and welcome topping of Resident Evil campiness. I can categorically say it is brilliant and you need to play it. It would have easily taken the number 1 slot if not for the next game existing.
Number 1, the most important one.
Thimbleweed Park, where to begin? Ron Gilbert, Gary Winnick and David Fox returned to the early days of Lucasfilm Games to create a lost disc-style classic point-and-clicker, taking cues from the many adventures they made. It sits comfortably somewhere between Maniac Mansion and Monkey Island, with spatterings of Zach McCracken in its presentation. A kickstarted indie success that I backed on the second round of pledging, which not only netted me this insta-classic point-and-click game, I also got this gorgeous signed big box version of the game as well. And boy oh boy do they hit the feel exactly on the head. Set in the mysterious town of Thimbleweed Park, which has Twin Peaks vibes up the wazoo with sprinklings of True Detective. You can play as 5 separate characters and your mission is to solve a murder case amongst the many other mysteries and puzzles in the town. It has a gorgeous HUD which will be pleasing to lovers of the early days of LucasArts point-and-click games. The art is gorgeous and perfectly pixelated. The music, whilst in places not overtly memorable, sits comfortably within the game and it brings out its noir atmosphere. I took my time with it, pored over every interaction and exhausted every option I could with each character. The puzzles were a little on the easy side, but I loved every minute of it and I was sad when it was over. It definitely is a great place to start if you have never played a point-and-click game before. The engine Thimbleweed runs on was built from the ground up by Gilbert, and it shows a few improvements on the established mechanics of the genre, such as parallax scrolling, which I've never seen in a point-and-click game, reactive lighting, and a really simple but really effective point, click and hold gameplay mechanic that'll have your character constantly move in the direction you point. It is a polished and fast running engine that makes the game a pleasure to play. For me, sitting down to play through the game captured my nostalgia and held on tightly the whole way through, with many nods to previous video game series in a fun and endearing way. The writing and comedy is infectious, and by God that ending is simply just a stroke of genius in my opinion. Outside the game, the journey of the Kickstarter was nearly as interesting as the finished product. I have to mention the podcast that was a weekly stand-up meeting where the team would go through the work they did for the game. It is a literal goldmine of game development information and comes across extremely transparent in its presentation. It is well worth listening to if you enjoyed the game or are just interested in game development in general. There is also a dev blog on the Thimbleweed Park site which further fleshes out what went into making the game. It also, on a few notable occasions, actually added to the finished product. For example, there was public outcry regarding a scene in which a toilet roll was hung. This ended up making its way into the game, in a form of choose your own way to hang the toilet roll option. That type of meta comedy could only happen when the likes of Winnick and Gilbert get their brains together. You can tell the game was made with an intense love of the genre by the people who more or less created the genre how we know it. Thimbleweed Park is the type of game I wish was released every year for the rest of time. Get playing it immediately. So there we are. That is my top 6 video games of 2017. If you agree or definitely don't agree with this list, drop me a like or a dislike. If your list differs wildly from mine, let me know what you think the top 6 games of 2017 were down in the comments below. Please drop us a subscribe if you've enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching. I'm Jack, and this is Hit the Snake. Goodbye!
Hit the snake. Videos for no one watches now. Hit the snake. Looking at lovely things we have.